KPFA Radio presents The Final Straw Radio. The Final Straw is a weekly anarchist and anti-authoritarian radio show bringing you voices and ideas from struggle around the world. Since 2010, they've been broadcasting from occupied Salagi land in southern Appalachia, Asheville, North Carolina. They also frequently feature commentary, serious and humorous, by anarchist prisoner Sean Swain. Please enjoy this episode of The Final Straw Radio that previously aired live on KPFA Radio.
Airing on Asheville FM in Asheville, this is The Final Straw Radio, a weekly anarchist and anti-authoritarian broadcasts and podcast emanating out of occupied Chalagi land in southern Appalachia. We bring you voices and perspectives from projects and struggles all around the world, and you can find our archives, transcripts, ways to follow us and support us at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org. This week, you'll hear an interview with Jeremy White, filmmaker, activist, and street medic who's facing prison time in what has been dubbed the San Diego Antifa case. You'll hear Jeremy talk about what happened on January 9th, 2021 at the Stop the Steal rally, how the police interacted with members of American Guard and Proud Boys as they assaulted passersby, the conspiracy theory-driven DA Summers Stephan, and where the case is now. This interview was recorded in mid-March of 2024, before the case had resumed. You can find show notes with links to fundraisers for some of the defendants, as well as the transcript of this interview at our website.
My name is Jeremy. I go by he or they pronouns, and I'm an activist and organizer based out of Los Angeles.
Jeremy, could you give a brief overview of what happened on January 9th, 2021 at Pacific Beach in San Diego, and kind of like when you showed up there, what you and other folks were expecting? I know that this was just 3 days after the right-wing demonstrations took place across the USA, including in D.C., with the attempted coup. So if you could kind of just talk about what the air was like and sort of what the call was for this demonstration and what you were expecting.
Yeah, so on January 9th, 2021, there was a protest by some San Diego Trump supporters, right-wingers, that was planned. It was a Stop the Steal rally, like they were having all over the country. The thing about this one protest, it wasn't just politically charged Trump supporters. It was members of the Proud Boys and American Guard that had also vocalized that they were going to be there. As we know now, watching everything that happened with the DC hearings, the Proud Boys have been proven to be a violent gang. So, and then the American Guard is a well-known white supremacist group that's always getting wrapped up in violence. I don't think it started in San Diego. I think it started on the East Coast, but it's definitely got a stronghold here. They decided to have this rally, and local anti-fascists from San Diego put together a counter-protest. People were invited from neighboring cities to come support if they could, and I was invited to come take part as a street medic, which is something I've been doing for years now. We got down there. It was kind of like any other action with these right-wingers, like standard procedure. The cops securely have their backs to them, facing us with their weapons and their batons. These guys were violent from the moment we hit the ground on the boardwalk. We were shot at with a BB gun by the kid of one of the American Guard members. People brought knives and smoke grenades and different kinds of weapons, vests, things like that. And we just went through like a counter-protest throughout the day. It was certainly no different than most other actions I've been to. I was there de-escalating, treating people. We go home after the police call a dispersal order. I don't even think there were arrests made that day. I could be wrong, but I don't think there was any arrests made that day. So we all go home, and 11 months later, at 4:30 in the morning, 12 activists from San Diego up to Los Angeles had their homes raided at the same time. And I've been dealing with this court case since, in and out of court for more than 2 years.
Just to, since you were there, and you could see where the crowd of Stop the Steal folks were putting their energy, why did they go to Pacific Beach? It sounds like a pier area near the ocean. I don't know if it's some sort of, is it near the administrative center of San Diego? Is it, is there a federal building there? Or were they just waiting for a counter demonstration or just kind of getting angry at passersby? What was that like?
I think they just wanted publicity and visibility in their choice of a location. I could be wrong. I'm not from San Diego, so I'm not super familiar with the lay of the land there. But it is, like you said, it's like a pier. It's like going to Santa Monica to have a big protest. And I will say, with our experience with the Trump supporters, they love going to places like that. Like they would constantly gather in Beverly Hills and Santa Monica, Hollywood to have their little hate rallies. So I think that was just the case. They were just looking for a very visibly public place to throw up their Sieg Heil salutes and whatever else they were doing that day.
So would you talk a little bit about the politics of San Diego? You've mentioned that groups like the Proud Boys or American Guard, you said, yeah, and other these are like fighting clubs. This is one thing that they focus on, is brawling with people in public places, like Western chauvinist organizations. And yeah, so it kind of makes sense that they're looking for fights because this is what they do and this is the aesthetic that they pull together. Can you give like an overview? I know you said you're not from San Diego, but you're close enough to the region. If you could talk about sort of the politics of the town. I know it's a big military town. Like there's a lot of naval installations. It's right near the border with Mexico, so I'm sure it's like there's a lot of angry white people that are politicized around that sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. And it's oddly, like I've been going to San Diego most of my life. I grew up in Los Angeles, so it's economically it just seems like a nice little beach town. But then when you get into politically, it's a lot more right wing ideology out there. Like you said about the border, I don't know the stats on this, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Border Patrol agents live down there because it's so close. And definitely a strong showing of right-wing political support that we could see. San Diego up into Orange County was very pro-Trump as well.
That definitely tracks. So you said 11 months later, 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m., knock on the door. Can you talk about what the arrest was like?
It was brutal. I had just been kind of getting to know the next door neighbors. I just moved into the place I'm at, and we were up late, probably 2:30 by the time I went to bed, and I go to sleep, and it felt like 15 minutes later, there's pounding on my door and a megaphone, and I was so disoriented. I threw on a bathrobe and started rushing down the stairs, slipped on the stairs, got to the door, still tying my bathrobe shut when I opened the door, and there's an AR-15 and like 15 cops with a megaphone and a strobe light pointing at my face. It was pretty horrifying. They didn't announce who they were there for. They never at any point said names of anybody. They just said occupants of the address. I was the first one out. They made me, without even having my robe tied, made me walk towards them and then turn around and get down and all that. So it was early December. It was very cold. Myself and my roommates were brought outside and just held outside for about an hour on the concrete with no shoes on. And then finally they brought me in and said, we have a warrant, search warrant for basically everything you own, every electronic, any bit of gear, any black clothing. They took stuff that had nothing to do with protests. They took art off my wall that was like personal art that they said was Antifa art, which is really funny. I hope to see that in court. As evidence. Like they took my Squid Game masks that I made for cosplay for Halloween the year before and filed it as evidence. But yeah, we got through a few hours of them searching, and then they hauled me off to San Diego with, I wasn't in the car with anyone else. We were all brought separately, but then I started to see people file into this holding room, and it was apparent that this was a mass operation. Like they hit 12 people at the same time, so early in the morning that nobody could, call each other or mount a response or warning or anything as they do. And we just started slowly finding out about it while in jail, trying to get calls out to figure out what was going on. It was very scary.
Yeah, that sounds really, really frightening, especially if you're not being told what the hell's going on. Antifa art, huh?
Apparently. And what's funny is I have a ton of anti-fascist art in my house. I make and like support local artists who are leftists. So I have a lot of great art, leftist art. This was not that. It's my film design logo that I made for myself. And I made a little tiny painting of it. And they said that this is some kind of Antifa related artwork. So that was really funny.
Yeah, well, apparently they're art critics.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, would you talk a bit about and this was multiple agencies. I mean, it was out of the jurisdiction
Oh, yeah.
anyway, but you were like in another interview you've mentioned, well, could you go rattle off some of the names of agencies that were involved in this?
Yeah, it was a multi-jurisdictional, multi-agency task force between San Diego PD, LAPD, and LA sheriffs. So I had representatives from all those fine organizations inside of my living room, threatening and bullying, and it's crazy. I still walk through there sometimes and can feel the energy.
Yeah.
I remember the thing that I said to them as they finally like took me off. They let me get dressed in front of like 10 cops inside my living room, stripped me down naked, and made me get dressed so I can go to jail. And then they were taking me out to the car, and I saw, the entire block is cop cars, 30 cop cars from end to end. And that was just for me. And I didn't even know at this point that there were 11 other people. And I told him right before he put me in the car, we could have healthcare, but we have this instead. And at that point, I didn't even know the scope of it. Once we got locked up, I started hearing the cops from San Diego talk about all the overtime they're racking up and chuckling with each other about how they're making money. It's just surreal,
Yeah, it's a good thing they're union jobs.
Yeah.
God, that sucks. So I guess would you talk a bit about the so-called San Diego Antifa case? What's alleged, and who stands accused? And then I'd like after that to get into particular charges that you were facing initially.
Yeah. So the San Diego Antifa case has been brought forward by the DA of San Diego, Summer Stephan, who I didn't know anything about her, never heard her name until this case. And you start looking into it, she's got alarming ties to local groups like the American Guard, right-wing, hard-right political donors down in San Diego. Like, her biggest donor is the father of that kid who just got indicted on the January 6th riots. A well-known internet influencer that started stirring the pot for January 6th, and he's been wrapped up in the lawsuit now. So she's got close ties. There's been some like quid pro quo stuff where a member of the American Guard got arrested. The sheriffs in San Diego themselves recommended prosecution, and she declined. And then there's a campaign contribution from the guy in question. So there's stuff like that we're definitely going to bring up at trial and show the jury, 12 Antifa or anti-fascist activists. Like, there's no org. There's no, I never once paid dues or was on an email chain or anything like that. It's not an organization. It's just it's an ideology, as we know. But 12 of us were arrested as if we were some organized criminal gang, and the actual organized criminal gang of the American Guard was like completely off the hook. And the stuff they were doing that day was crazy to think about. Like, at the end of the action, after the police issued the dispersal and all the leftists went home and started essentially avoiding being hunted by the police, as we did exactly as they asked and went back to our cars. We've all seen that. The American Guard was free to do what they intended to that day, which is initiate violence unchecked on the community. And they did just that. There was two people walking down an alley. The man had a shirt on. I don't know what the shirt said. It was something about George Floyd or Black Lives Matter. I don't even think he was at the protest. If he was just a local that was interested. So he's walking away, and this group attacks him, jumps him, and the female companion he had with him, jumped them and beat them up so bad that the woman pissed herself, and then they bragged about that on the video afterwards. And this is all hit the desk of the DA. She's seen it all, and she has refused to prosecute any violence that the right instituted. So it just becomes a clear case of selective prosecution, and it's incredibly politically motivated. When she was first, one of the other defendants that's still going to trial with me was the first to get arrested. Like I think a few months before all this happened, he was arrested. I could be wrong on the exact details, but he had a court case before we ever got to court. And I guess Summer Stephen or her I was going to say minion. Yes, ADA. Were straight up just quoting Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham in court to the judge to try to make their case. And that's unhinged in regards to like Antifa being this gang.
Yeah. So you were just talking about like the violence that was conducted by the participants and some of the participants of the Stop the Steal rally that was there. And as I understand too, they, members of that crowd were throwing smoke bombs at people and were shooting with like BB guns and such. Is that right?
There was a kid who came to the event. It was pretty early on, if memory recalls, before the big head-to-head clash between the two sides. They were just stalking us on the boardwalk. They'd send a couple people in to harass. One of them was a minor. He was like 17-ish. Came in with a group of his friends, coming in saying Antifa, and he pulled out a BB pistol and fired it. And he actually got detained and let go, and no charges were filed for him bringing a weapon to a protest. So it's clearly a one-sided thing.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, considering the kind of damage that even not to make light of it, but you can shoot your eye out with one of those, and like directing that towards people with political motivation is. I mean, in North Carolina, if it was a leftist, they would call that coming armed to the terror of the people. A misappropriation of an anti-Klan law that's on the on the books.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you were talking about conspiracy theories and the prosecutor, but as I understand, you also heard some of like similar conspiracy theories touted among some of the arresting officers, right? Or at least the officers on duty at the day of, I'm not sure which, concerning George Soros.
Yeah, I was asked if I got money or how much money I got from George Soros for protesting, as were some of the other defendants when we first got pulled into interrogation. And I just laughed and told them, I'm not going to say anything. I want a lawyer. And it was very odd to hear it in person from an authority figure like that. Like I've had that levied against me for years now online, and even in person at protests from some of these right wingers. But to have a detective, two detectives asking me that officially on a recorded thing was mind blowing, very surreal. I've never been paid. Like all of my whole history of activism has been grassroots. I've never joined any NGO or anything because it feels inherently flawed. So I've never gotten a dime for doing activism or organizing unless I was broke and needed support and put out a request for funds for something and people would help. But yeah, it's insane to me that they really do believe that we're this shady funded thing, that BLM was the same thing. It's wild to me that they just can't understand. I think that's the crux of it. That's kind of what I experienced with the gamut of political organizing from like marching for Bernie back in the day to marching against fascists. They just don't understand the passion and how we feel the need to be out there and stand up for what we believe in. So we have to be paid. We must be paid, right? I think that's the attitude I've gotten across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. And not only do we have to be paid, but that we need to have someone giving us orders.
Yeah.
And it falls in like when you're pointing to this, like, yes, influential survivor of the Holocaust from Hungary who does run like liberal think tanks and is a billionaire. Like he does fund politicians. He does fund organizations. But again, as you said, like being an anti-fascist does not mean you're involved in an organization. And it's a pretty old trope that was like, this was a Nazi and Klan thing back in the 1930s, was the idea that black folks couldn't be organizing themselves. Dumb workers couldn't be organized themselves into unions without somebody trying to motivate them through pay, because they have some nefarious plan of breaking down the righteous social order of the United States, or challenging like natural racial separation, or whatever sort of story people are telling themselves who believe in these like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. It tends to be Jewish string pullers. It, definitely goes back to Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion stuff. And that's a thing that's been repeated by Summer Steffen, as I understand. It was on like a website. I think your lawyer, maybe back in November, brought a challenge in the court. Could you talk a little bit about that?
He filed a motion for dismissal based on selective persecution, and really shined a light on her hard right ideologies. That was part of it. She had reposted and shared some really questionable stuff. Just her associations are super sketch when you think about like the people that she's getting money from, and how that manifested into this court case, just trying to set a national precedent for going after anti-fascist protesters as if they're a gang. But the motion didn't pass. It is hopefully, I believe, and my lawyer believes, will make an impact, because the judge has seen it, and we can talk about these things in trial and talk to the jury about it. But that's for me, it just seems very obvious that there's a quid pro quo. None of these guys. There's another thing that happened while we were on the ground. We didn't find out about it until way later, but the police were on their radio to each other from the helicopter down on the ground. They were talking back and forth, very clearly understanding each other, having a full-on conversation about the Proud Boys have hijacked this protest. They're not with the program. They're anti-police, and we can't control them anymore. And this was after, when they gave their first dispersal order, we said, cool, peace, we left, right? And the Proud Boys and American Guard and other people there just decided to get more violent and unruly as the day went on. And that's exactly what we knew would happen. So the fact that she hasn't prosecuted any of that really, I think, speaks to who she is as a person and what her political beliefs are, and how they're clouding any semblance of justice in this situation.
I mean, if I was a cop too, I'd be pretty pissed off about that.
Yeah. Thinking these are your guys, thinking they had your back, and then they give you the middle finger too.
Yeah. Well, also just like, I mean, if you want to talk about the DA giving you the finger, like, okay, like the counter protesters have left of their own accord once they were asked to, and then you've got these biker looking dudes who are still like trying to make problems and whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And perfectly fine, attacking cops, as has been seen in a lot of instances around the country.
Absolutely.
A few days later.
Absolutely.
6.
Yeah. Just 3 days later. Yeah. They were celebrating it among themselves. Some of the people present on the day in Pacific Beach were at the Capitol too. And some of them that were present were at downtown LA just 3 days before. They had their own like J6 thing where, right at City Hall, they were assaulting and attacking people that walked through. It was really ugly. And the cops were just letting them do it. Not only were they letting them do it, there was a small counter protest of leftists across the street. And I watched this police captain, Captain Rick Stabile, lead the right wingers into our midst and then leave. And it turned into a big brawl. And he just let it happen. And then when the right wingers got their asses beat by the people that were there, he arrested everybody, and you could just see, like, that's not how he thought it was going to go. He thought these guys were going to just demolish all these soy boy leftists, Antifa kids. But it's just crazy to me how that always goes down. And the cops I haven't believed in cops for a long, long time, but just the idea that they're there to protect and serve anything but the ruling class and their own personal interests is so
confused. Yeah. And to even say that officer like sat back and let it happen. It's more like he made it happen.
Oh, made it happen. Yeah. I mean, and then we found out the day of, that was J6. He's on his phone, well, supposedly organizing this police response, cheering on the riots that were happening in DC on Twitter.
Yeah, and this is like wild speculation. I mean, just to say, like, law enforcement obviously like often has a less than objective viewpoint of how the world operates and what's going on in the world. And there were a lot of, like, during the Trump administration, and I'm sure on either side of it, a lot of those what are they called? I'm probably going to cut this, but a bunch of those information centers that are adjacent to, like, they're meant as being a place for sending around communications between federal law enforcement and local jurisdictions. Anyway, a bunch of them had been found to be purveying a lot of, like, carrying a bunch of just right-wing conspiracy theories that had, like, a lot of them relating to Antifa, a lot of them relating to international funding for Black Lives Matter. So, I mean, that fusion centers, a bunch of information in fusion centers, because they don't really have that much oversight from the outside, carries the sort of far right perspectives that are on the bias path of the cops that are running them in the first place. To get back to, like, when you got arrested and booked, what were you initially charged with?
I don't even remember. It was 5 felonies. I think it was multiple assault felonies, conspiracy to riot. I think there may have been committing a riot as well, but it was a lot. It was very overwhelming. And I had this public defender that hadn't even looked at discovery, hadn't filed a single motion, had done no work on the case, and was trying to get me to plead to all 5 felonies. And I'm so glad that I didn't go with that. I mean, I never would have. I'm a fighter. I've been doing this a long time. But just weeks later, a month or two later, the grand jury indictment came down and it was dropped to 2. So luckily, nobody took those initial charges, because I think they all reduced a bit, which, as you know, like, grand jury indictments are the easiest thing to get because it's the prosecution with the grand jury, and there's no oversight, really. They get to just pitch and plug in their heads whatever concepts and ideas they want, and there's no defense there to argue it. And even still, the charges were reduced from 5 felonies down to 2. The felonies I'm facing right now are felony assault and felony conspiracy to commit a riot, and those charges are completely ludicrous. I never touched anyone that day. I didn't lay my hands on anyone. I didn't institute violence on the guy they're saying I assaulted. If you look at the video, which I finally got to do a year and a half into this case, what they're saying is that I pointed at a guy and then he got jumped, as if I said, "That guy, get him." And then the crowd responded. That's ridiculous for many reasons. First off, I was there as a medic, clearly marked as a medic, and I was from out of town and had no power, control, sway, understanding of the lay of the land or who was here. I was just there to help. So the idea that I would be able to just point and they would do my bidding is ridiculous. They obviously think that I'm the ringleader of Antifa in, like, either Los Angeles or Southern California or whatever it is. That could not be further from the case. I really, in that space, in that, like, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor summer that we went through, I was super focused on stepping back, not taking the lead on anything. As a white guy who was there to support, I'm just there to support. And there was no shots being called by me at any point in time. I was literally just there doing community mutual aid and defense during all those tumultuous times. So that's the assault charge. What I was actually doing on the video, which I finally got to see, is I was pointing down an alleyway because one of the American Guard guys had just thrown a smoke grenade over the police line right at us. And the police were getting edgier. They were starting to, and we know, like, when they see smoke, they start to freak out. They can't see anymore, and it doesn't matter who threw it. So I was pointing down an alley toward an egress point in case people wanted to get out of that situation. But they're saying I pointed at this guy. The other charge is conspiracy, which, like I said, I don't even know. I still don't know. It's been 2 years. I still don't know most of the names of the other defendants. I had no relationship really with any of them, especially people in San Diego. Like, it was just showing up to a protest thing. So the idea that I conspired to commit a riot, I mean, I didn't conspire, and we didn't commit a riot. There wasn't a riot because nobody was arrested for rioting. It's just very, very much just grasping at straws and throwing everything at the wall and seeing what'll stick with my case. So we're fighting. We're going to trial this month, and just going to fight it to the end.
This is Bursts, and we'll be right back after this message from KPFA.
KPFA Radio is a community-powered, listener-supported radio station based in Berkeley, California. We are able to bring you this content through donations and support from our listeners. Please consider supporting KPFA through a donation by visiting www.kpfa.org/donate. And now let's get back to the program.
Welcome back to the Final Straw Radio. Yeah, and this is like total speculation, but I wonder if they're operating under and not in good faith, but operating under the conspiracy theory that was present on Jan 6th in DC that was being propagated, that Antifa were the people that were doing the violence and that were doing the riot. I mean, the cops, obviously, if there's a line of cops between two crowds of people and they can see them fighting with each other and they can see the politics and probably know some of the individuals in the crowd that are that are agitating and that are attacking bystanders and stuff, they're going to know that's not true. But yeah, I guess who knows in the wild world of the DA, what she actually believes besides what Summer Stephan has said. Right? Yeah.
No, I have no clue how deep, she probably thinks we're all shape-shifting alien protesters. I don't know. I have no clue how deep the conspiracy goes in the minds of the people that are prosecuting this, but it doesn't feel like any semblance of justice. I've heard the judge say in court that this just sounds like a bar fight. Why are we doing this? What is this about? We're coming back for 2 years, pushing the trial. It's going because they won't drop the charges because they really need this win. And I'm just not willing to give it to them, and neither are the other defendants that have held on. So, and it's not like the ones that pled out. It's heartbreaking. Most of them pled out because they had public defendants that weren't doing anything for them, just like I did. I got lucky. I got in contact with an amazing lawyer that has been working this case pro bono for more than a year, and I would not be talking to you right now if that wasn't the case. So, it's heartbreaking that these other individuals were scared and threatened by the system enough that they took charges that are completely unjust.
Yeah. Yeah, and one would imagine that if there was a pre-existing conspiracy, I know that in Georgia with the Stop Cop City, they're trying to make the argument with their RICO indictments that that anyone who answers a call to come to a thing therefore must be connected somehow. And at least there's some degree in the Georgia case, as much as the state is fighting against it, for people to try to get together for collective defense. But that doesn't seem like that's really been able to be pursued in the San Diego case, which kind of just talks about the disunity between the individuals as opposed to pre-existing strong relationships or Big Daddy Soros money coming in.
Oh, absolutely. I've been an organizer for a long time, and from everything from political to grassroots mutual aid, humanitarian work, stuff like that. And this was not organized. There was no organization behind it. It was fly by the seat of your pants, just people wanting to go out there and stand up against the police state, the fascists that were feeling emboldened more and more to come out and enact violence on communities. It's crazy to me that, we've glorified World War II and fighting the Nazis, and we still do it to this day. I don't know. I figured fascist bad. Why wouldn't everyone be anti-fascist? And it's very, very telling going through the times we are right now, everything going on in the world right now, of how fascism takes root, how it can be supported by people you never think it would be supported by. And kind of how easy it is. It's the frog in boiling water, not realizing it's being cooked. Those of us that have been keeping our eyes out, we've seen it. We've seen the water boiling. We've been yelling and shouting it for years now. But for most of the people in this country, I feel like they don't understand like just how bad. Like New York has National Guard in the subways. Los Angeles, California, they're implementing crazy laws like the surveillance state that just happened in LA with the getting access to 10,000 cameras throughout the city, including personal doorbell cameras and things like that, which is terrifying. So yeah, fascism's here for sure.
Yep. It did happen here.
Yep. It did happen here. I love that.
So you've talked about like how you showed up as a medic to help de-escalate and to help people that were injured because everyone knew at this point what groups like American Guard and Proud Boys, what their modus operandi is. Yeah. And so, but I mean, you're fighting this in part because this is BS and you don't want to catch some felonies for something that you didn't do. But I wonder, like, if you could talk about like your fears or views on the implications of the conspiracy charges in this case.
Terrifying. Some of the overt charges for conspiracy are, wearing all black or saying ACAB. We were in a signal chat together, like an organizing chat that I was just added to. Like I didn't put it together. Anyone who knows Signal, you don't even have to accept those. If they have your number, they can just add you to a chat and make you an admin. So I don't even know when this chat was put together. I wasn't involved in organizing it. Like I said, I was invited down just to medic, and that's what I went there to do, and that's what I did. So it's really scary. It's scary that we're seeing it already. Stop Cop City, the Justice 8 here in LA as well. There are these politically motivated cases where they're going after us with conspiracy charges, RICO charges. And, as much as I loved seeing the Proud Boys get their comeuppance after January 6th, it was kind of a little scary for me too to watch them. And not that they aren't a gang, like you said before, they're a fight club. You have to go initiate violence on someone to be a part of the Proud Boys. And that's just them. Who knows for groups that are avowed white supremacists, neo-Nazis like the American Guard and RAM. So
yeah, the whole like building of an argument that there is an active conspiracy, like I mean the Trump administration, including their DOJ, was attempting to approach leftist and anti-racist and or like black liberation or black civil rights, even like organizations as terrorist organizations. And it's not just the Trump administration, like the continued like the long if you want to call it deep state or whatever, but like the bureaucracy that is still in power, that's in the FBI, still using terms like black identity extremists or anti-government extremists for anti-authoritarian or like anarchists. Like it's like the state seems to want to create these umbrellas that you're talking about where everyone wears black or everyone says ACAB or everyone who does that therefore must have been inducted to some group and can be treated as a class of people. And it's scary. It's what they tried to do with J20. It's what they're trying to do in Georgia. It's like on an international scale. It's what Germany has been trying to do in the Lena E case. It's what's happening with the Budapest anti-fascist defendants, is international governments working with each other and then attempting to charge like organized conspiracies where it doesn't take organized conspiracies. It's just people concerned about fascists taking the streets and attacking people.
Yeah. That's it harkens back to Germany doing that in the 30s to socialists and social democrats and leftists. Those were the first people they went after. And it's not surprising that they're starting to do those kind of roundups, as it were. And I remember being called a climate terrorist by Obama.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you for being at Standing Rock. It's crazy to think that there's one party that fascism claims allegiance to, because they work so well hand in hand with one another. One's just more overt and the other one's a little more gentle, but at the end of the day, it's just that ratchet effect over and over and over.
Yep. Yeah. So I know this is like a different jurisdiction and neither of us are lawyers. This is a different jurisdiction from where you're being charged, but it's the same federal district, I'm pretty sure, the like Southern California federal district. But just in the last couple of weeks, Robert Rundo, who was one of the founders of the Rise Above movement, which is the inspiration for a lot of the active clubs that have been popping up, white supremacist fight clubs and training groups that are this sort of fusion of skinhead and I guess just like an updated like skinhead movement of sorts, but with maybe more like overtly fascist politics. He was extradited from Romania. He was brought to court to face charges for 2017 violence that he committed as a member of Rise Above movement in Southern California, I think in Huntington Beach. And federal district judge Cormac J. Carney decided not to pursue it, saying that there was a bias in at least federal prosecution of anti-fascists, that anti-fascists were not being charged with violence. So these people that are all over film and promote beating the crap out of anyone they don't like in the streets, like Rob Rundo, get away. In this case, as I understand, the feds have re-detained him near the border with Mexico, and are going to try to enter appealing. And he's obviously a flight risk. But besides Robert Rundo, which because he's done it before, they had to like grab him in Europe where he was quote unquote in hiding. But I don't know if there were 11 people in this case and 8 people have taken pleas so far and been prosecuted on these bogus charges, again, different jurisdiction, but it's quite clear that the U.S. quote unquote justice system is not like laying low on giving charges to anti-fascists. A month and a half ago, I talked to supporters of Alex Stokes in New York, who defended himself and people around him from Proud Boy and other alt-right violence in the streets on January 6th in 2021. And he, is facing more than 2 decades inside, like a comparable charge to Enrique Tarrio. But yeah, I wonder, like, do you think that there might be room for a challenge in this case to say, like, look, they've gotten their blood. Like, it's obvious that anti-fascists are not getting, if Rundo gets away, it's clear that there's a bias about far-right people that are documented doing violence, and all the other people that were at this rally that beat up those bystanders aren't getting convicted of anything. I don't know.
Whose faces and identities have all been confirmed. All that information's been sent to the DA. So, there's nothing, no charges brought for that. We'll have to see if the Rundo case has any bearing on this. At the end of the day, it's all up to the judge and how he feels if he wants to consider it. But it is a weirdly twisted inversion of kind of what we're going on here. I know their argument was that the leftists instituted a bunch of violence in that case, and none of them were arrested. That's kind of exactly, except for we're not this violent group. We're not a fight club. It's not even we. It's just the left. It's I didn't know of any groups while I was doing my organizing that were planning to go out and mess up Fash and you get your stripes or whatever if you go beat up a Proud Boy. Like, that's just not how we operated. It was usually, for me, I went out and saw people half my size getting brutalized time and again by the police, by these right-wing protesters, just ganging up on them and beating the crap out of them. And that was part of why I was inspired to go out and stand up against them and be there and use my size and my experience. Anyway, the Rundo case, sorry. So my lawyer and I have discussed the Rundo case. I believe he's filing a motion to dismiss based on that. I just don't know if it's been done yet and what the outcome will be, obviously. But we'll see. It'd be very interesting if we were able to use something so politically charged towards the right to help us in this case as well. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And not to say, again, like three-way fight over here, not to say that strengthening the court's ability to convict people is ever going to like work in the way of actual justice or defending people. But it's interesting to see. Yeah. So what are the next steps in your case? Like you've got a hearing, as I understand, on the 18th. You've been doing some fundraising events. I guess if you wouldn't mind talking about what's up next in court and how people can support your struggle, like you're fighting back.
Yeah. We are set for trial on the 18th. I don't know if that's going to be the actual date or not. I know that there are possibly a couple motions for continuance on the table. It's the weekend, so we'll see what happens. But assuming those don't get granted, then we'll be in trial on the 18th. The judge has already called 300 jurors forward for jury selection, so it's very real right now. It's surreal to me because this has been on the horizon for 2 years, and it keeps going, keeps pushing, and I just try to live my life. There's some days, some blessed weeks where I've been able to forget about this whole thing because the next court case was so far down the road, and I could just like do my job and live my life. And now it's very, very real. It's overwhelming. So I put together a couple fundraisers. One is tonight in Boyle Heights at the First Street Billiards. I know this is probably going to be aired too late, but we've got a really, really awesome show with like burlesque performers and artists and musicians and food vendors. So we're really excited to do some cool community engagement and solidarity work tonight. And then if anyone out there listening wants to support, I've got a GoFundMe up to cover court filing costs for my lawyer. He's doing the case pro bono, but everything costs money. San Diego doesn't have e-filing, so he has to print and FedEx everything. He needs to travel and get lodging in San Diego, as do I. So if you're on Instagram, you can go to Superpower to the People, all spelled out. And they're helping out a lot with promoting the fundraiser and information about the trial. So there's a pin post there, and in the bio you can find the GoFundMe link.
And it might not happen on the 18th, right? It's just that's the next court date.
Yes, yeah, that's the next. It's supposed to be when trial is set for, but there are a couple different continuances that are going to be entered. It sounds like so. My experience with this trial is to come to bear. It might get pushed again. We'll see. That's the hardest thing about this is, I was asked on a recent interview about court support, about getting people out there, and it's so hard. It's San Diego, and there's been days where I've had people come out and support, but it turned out to just be like 15 minutes in court for them to set the next date because there was a continuance, and people drove down to San Diego and back to be in court for 15 minutes. So until I get really solid estimates on when it's going to start, I probably won't put out the call for support. And by support, I want to make it clear, peaceful, like not disrupting. It's very important to not shine a bad light on this case by doing that. As much as I love disruption, it doesn't gain us anything in this sense,
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I didn't ask about that you wanted to talk about that either you want me to ask about, like make a prompt for, or just things that occur to you that maybe you want to get out but you haven't been asked?
No, this was a great interview. I think just if anything, folks, support jail support in your area. There's a big need for it, and it's just going to get worse. I live in Los Angeles. We have a lot of wealthy people here. Some of them well-meaning that kind of want to contribute to things, and even here in LA, it's really hard to raise money for these activists and protesters who get caught up on legal charges. So if in any way you can support those around there doing the work, it's always much appreciated. I can say that firsthand. I've been arrested for using chalk at a protest and had to bail out. And So, and just stay safe out there. Keep your head on a swivel.
Is there, and it's okay if not, I can just cut this, but is there any of your art out there, any of the films that you've worked on that you want to point people to, like any independent stuff, or do you want to just skip that?
Oh, yeah, I would totally plug Bitch Ass. It's a really fun, it's a 90s period film, black horror comedy, I guess you could call it. It's not a straight up comedy, it's a horror film, but there's a lot of fun moments. It's a guy who dons a mask and decides to start killing the local gang that beat him up when he was a kid. And he does so by creating kill machines based on board games because he wanted to be a board game designer. So there's like a Connect 4 that's 7 feet tall with guillotine blades above the holes. So if you have to use your arms and hands to score and then it cuts off your head. There's like a Jenga set that's like hangs you as you're playing. It was a really cool movie. A lot of fun.
It's like the Saw meets what the correct version of Revenge of the Nerds could have been.
Or like the people under the stairs. Yeah, no, it's a really fun movie. I always love plugging that because it was a total indie passion project that we did during COVID, and it won Best Audience Award at South by.
Wow, congrats. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. And then if you want to support my art, just you can hit me up on Instagram at JW Film Design. I've been making a lot of art pieces. I'll start posting more photos of that stuff if anybody wants to buy some pieces. It's very high quality leftist artwork that I make in my spare time.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. I'll be sure to plug that and put that in the social posts when this goes out. Jeremy, thanks for taking the time to chat, and and good luck.
Thank you. I really appreciate you.
This is The Final Straw Radio. The show will later be archived at thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org, and you can email us with questions and suggestions at thefinalstrawradio@riseup.net or thefinalstrawradio@protonmail.com. If you'd like to use any episode for your project or radio show, feel free to do so. Just send us an email to let us know. If you care to, you can send us letters at TFSR, P.O. Box 6004, Asheville, North Carolina, 28816. You've been listening to The Final Straw Radio. You can find us on thefinalstrawradio.noblogs.org and by searching for our social media handles, variants of that, or TFSR.
I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you want to find more KPFA radio content, log on to www.kpfa.org. Also follow us on social media by visiting Facebook at KPFA 94.1 and Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at KPFA Radio. Plus, check out our KPFA TV video content on YouTube and twitch.tv at KPFA Radio. Subscribe to this podcast and stay updated to when we release episodes of shows representing the best of KPFA Radio.